Hello and welcome to another live coaching. It is Sunday, March 24th, and I am broadcasting from Maui. How are you doing? How is your week? What have you been up to? I got on the water. We've had some windy days on Maui, and yeah, I had a lot of fun. We had a small windy session, which is what this video is from, and I've been in a little bit of a rut since I've been back to Maui, and all I needed was the waves to get smaller and the wind to come up, which makes everything easier. And I had a lot of fun, and it was great to have a super active session. When there's more wind and the waves are small but not too small, you can catch a lot of waves. You can ride a lot of waves, and that just makes it more fun as well. So I really enjoyed this day. This was a couple days ago. I took the day off yesterday. It looked super windy. Brazzy was on a 4-2, and I just decided to take the day off. I had a lot of fun the day before, and I was a little bit worried about injuring myself with those really crazy winds and busy with some other things. But I'm looking to get on the water again today. Looks like it's going to be a good day, another good day. How are you guys doing? We got a few people showing up in the chat. Jorg said no surf this week. Rasmus is in Hamburg. Moin, moin. Yeah, Maui's finally a bit more stable with the weather. The first month that I've been here has been really up and down, kind of light wind, rainy. It's still rainy, but at least now the wind is a bit more filled in. Sometimes though, even a bit too much wind. I feel like I don't want it too windy at Hokipa. I like it. The 4750 range is perfect. Once it gets windier than that, the wave starts to get messier. It's hard to, hard to get lay down on the bottom turn how I want to. I've also been riding my new boards, which helped. So, as you guys know, I've been feeling kind of out of it for at least the last month that I've been here, and so I wanted to get my comfort back on my old board. So I was riding my old boards, and that wasn't really working. So I went out on some of my new boards, and they take a bit of getting used to. But sometimes that getting used to process is what you need to help you get out of a funky situation, because then you're not expecting your gear to feel a certain way. You're more reacting to the gear, trying to adjust yourself to the gear, which is the mindset that is better to have when you're windsurfing, when you're wave riding as well. So I think there's some connection there. We got Suna in the chat. Hello, Suna. Matt in the chat. Matt had a fun session on the 5.5. Nice, this morning. Awesome. Happy to hear that, Matt. And we got Christoph in Waddell. 14-second period. That sounds pretty good for Waddell. Sounds pretty good. Awesome. Do you ever get photos or video from the land? I would love to see what a March 14-second period looks like at Waddell. Just take some video with your phone also. I'd love to see it. I've had a lot of fun sailing Waddell, but more in the summer. So more like in March. I mean, sorry, not March. It's March now. More like May, June. All right, we got Axel in the chat. Hello, Axel. This is my session from a couple days ago. It was super windy, small waves. I had a lot of fun. And what else is going on before we jump into the Facebook group coaching? We some news about Windsurfing Masterclass weeks coming up this year. So some in-person weeks are happening. I'm doing 2 in Maui over the next month or 2 months. The first is in April, and it will be a Learn to Loop weekend. And so the idea is, woo, look at that big backflip from Brasinho. I'm getting distracted looking at this Hokipa footage. So the first is the Learn to Loop weekend. And the idea is to jumpstart the progress on the forward loops. It doesn't really matter where you are in the forward loop. It could be that you're already landing a few or already trying the loop. It could be that you've never tried the loop before. But this is an advanced process for learning the forward loop. It's not for everyone. I think everyone has a different journey. So for some people, that journey is years. But if you feel up to an accelerated program, it will be a weekend course and we'll go through all the steps. And the idea is not to go from zero to looping in a weekend, but to give you all the tools. Maybe you do go from zero to looping in the weekend, but for sure you'll come out of the weekend with the tools to know how to train and go into the forwards yourself. And it's a lot of fun doing it with other people, going through it in a safe and controlled way. For the forward loop, I'm really against the just go for it mentality. You don't want to jump off that fear cliff. I think it's really important to learn it in steps and stages, and then you're learning it safely and with the correct form. And that is so important to have the correct form. It makes it, one, so you can do it more consistently, and two, you can do it more safely, which is really important. So we're going to do a Learn to Loop weekend on Maui in April. You can sign up for that. I put the link in the description for this live coaching, but it's also in the Facebook group. Two, there's going to be a masterclass on Maui in May. You can apply for that as well. The links are all in all of these places, in the Facebook group, in the description of this live coaching. And so the idea with that masterclass is it's going to be a wave sailing fundamental course, like the other courses we do. The focus will be on primarily wave riding, but with jumping as well if we have the conditions. It will include introduction to Hokipa. We're going to do a lot of fun things. I'm really looking forward to it. Maui is such a special place for windsurfing. It's the mecca of wave sailing, and so it's really cool to teach here. And there's a lot of fun and exciting things that we can do. Then after Maui, the next one that's confirmed is Tenerife. So if you're interested in Tenerife as well, that's in August. And then Denmark, like we always do, in September. Now there's the option as well of some other courses, for example, in Morocco in June or July. Fill out the form for that. If you are interested, there's also, with all those other links at the end, there's another survey about interest in other options. And so if you're interested in one of those other options, like for example, Morocco in June or Ginchu in August, let me know via that survey. And if enough people are interested, those courses will happen. I would love to do an introduction to Ginchu course in August. Ginchu in Portugal is a really difficult place to windsurf, and it's kind of fickle, but I think it'd be amazing if enough people are interested to go there. It's an amazing place to be and do a course there. So anyway, that's the end of the admin stuff. I'm going to get back to the chat, and then we're going to load up the Facebook group and get into the coaching. All right, Hans is with us. Hans sailed this morning, full power 4.7 on the decurve and the flex tail. Awesome, Hans. Do you keep track of the days that you get? Hans, it seems like you are always sailing. I love it. People don't think of Belgium as being a windsurfing hotspot, but you are getting on the water, it seems like almost every week, and that's awesome. I wonder what makes the difference. Is it because you're driving more, or you have the time to be more flexible? What do you think your competitive advantage is, Hans? Either way, I absolutely love it. Nico, we got Nico in the chat. Hello, Nico. Christoph says, what else works more in the summer? And he's getting a 20-second period next week. That's crazy. Whoa. All right, we got Aloha on Facebook. I'm just going to pause going through the chat here just to go check the video. So the question was where I really, not this one, but the next wave was where I really felt that my board finally started to feel comfortable under my feet. My turns started to feel more comfortable. I remember this wave where I felt free and in control. And up until this point, even though I've been having a lot of fun, did that just cut out for you guys? It cut out for me. Even though I've been having a lot of fun, this was the moment where I really felt that connection with my board. And it took a while to get here. It took a while to get here. We got Rich in the chat. Good evening, Rich. Facebook had some sand and skate sailing last week to keep from going totally nuts. Took a few beatings at the Cape. Oh, this must be Dana. Awesome to have you here, Dana. All right. Rich also had 2 nice sessions. Hans says flexible work hours. Stefan here. Hello, Sweden. Welcome, welcome, welcome. Yeah, yesterday, full power 4-5 Hokipa. This must be, is this Jerry? Must be. Yeah, it's been windy at Hokipa. It's been crazy windy. Today also looks crazy windy. I'm going to pack some smaller sails. Normally, Maui is so consistent that I'm only on a 4-7 or a 5-0. And in fact, in my truck, I only have those 2 sails. So I've got to pack some smaller ones for today because it is windy. Windy. I can see the trees. Blowing. All right, we're going to get into the Facebook group. Just let this footage wrap up. We've got, I think, one more wave from this little windy session of mine. If you guys have any questions about this Hokipa footage, fire away. Like I said, I had a lot of fun. It was definitely the most fun I've had in a session since I've been back on Maui. I had a lot of fun in Cape Town when we were doing the masterclass, but since I've been back on Maui, this is definitely the most fun that I've had. And Hokipa is not normally like this, where it's so small and windy. It can be like this in the summer sometimes. But anyway, really fun session. Kind of reminds me a bit of what it can feel like in Pozo, where you're doing lots of tricks, one-hit waves. Yeah, super fun. All right, I'm going to pull up the Facebook group, and we're going to get into the Facebook review. You guys know the drill by now. If you have any questions, just interrupt me. Put it in the chat. I always want to hear from you how it's going. All right, I'm going to load up the Facebook page. Aloha. We got Ragnar in the chat. All right, here we are on Facebook. Aloha, Ragnar. If you're just joining us, say hello. Say hello. Let us know if you sailed this week. All right, let's check out the Facebook group. All right. First up, we have this post from Jerry, who is on Maui. I've been sailing with him at Hokipa. Jerry is an alumni of a Windsurfing Masterclass. He's been on our courses in Europe, and he spends a lot of time on Maui now. And these photos are from Jimmy Hebb, and I found them really interesting. There's another photo from this same photo album from Jimmy Hebb that I wanted to pull up. I might have to go hunt for it on Facebook. We got Max in the chat. Nice. Max had a session Friday morning, 5:03. Not quite enough, but better than nothing, I'm sure. All right. So let's look at these photos from Jerry. So Jerry has had a bit of a tough introduction coming back to Maui now. So he's saying that he needs to focus less on finding the right line and timing for his bottom turns. This allows me more to focus on them. He's still often going too early or misjudging the wave, and he wants to work on the hit bend in the bottom turn and working on the U and some aerials. I helped him with some board tuning tips, and that seemed to help with a different board setup. One thing I want to point out with these bottom turn positions, so I like how this looks. I don't know where this ended up going in this cutback, but the way the board is good. What I don't like as much is how close the sail is being pulled. A lot of times in the cutback, you want far away from you, but it looks like we're getting really good rail engagement. I like this turn. Going for an aerial. Often in the beginning, when you're learning aerials, you want to make sure that you're pointing down the line, not back towards the beach. So that will make a really big difference for landing it back inside the wave. Because what happens when you're trying to point back to the beach is that then you're going too laterally, you're going too sideways. So you're hitting the lip going down the line, but then turning back to the beach, and so that you're turning in the air instead of flying straight. And so if you want to sort of shoot down the line, I think there's, if I go back to here, I think there's an aerial somewhere in the beginning here. And we'll maybe right here. Yep. So what I want to point out here is just how down the line I'm pointing. So not trying to go back to the beach. So hitting the lip, getting that high five. You see how my board's going into the lip, getting the high five, hitting the wave just as it's curling, as it's throwing forward, and that launches me into the air. But look where I'm looking, and look where the board is pointing. This is huge. If you're trying to learn aerials, the biggest mistake I see from advanced riders to riders who are good, riders who are high level, and they're getting into the aerials, what they do is they get to this part, but then they think that they need to go in front of the wave, and that means going back to the beach. And so then, like if we go back to this picture here, you can see the nose is pointing into the beach, head is looking into the beach. But what we actually want is to be looking down the line. And what that does, it allows you to keep your momentum. And so instead of thinking about going up and in front, you're more thinking about traveling in a little rainbow line, and that line goes down the line. So you're doing a rainbow down the line. You're not doing an L. You're not a horse on a chessboard, right? You're not doing an L. You're doing a little rainbow just up and down, but you're keeping all of your forward energy, all of your forward momentum down the line. So if we break this down again, I'm looking here somewhere, which is way down the line and where I'm going to land. I'm not looking back to the beach, and I'm pointing the nose of my board also down the line, not back to the beach. And that allows me to keep that momentum and to travel forward. And ultimately, that is what allows me to land back in front of the wave. Because if you're thinking about going back to the beach, you're at this moment when you're hitting the lip, you're disconnecting from that power and you're changing your direction. And that then limits your projection. So you're changing your direction, and that limits your projection. And we want to get as much projection as possible, and so as little change of direction as possible. And so we're hitting the lip and steering down the line. You're just thinking about going in that straight line. It's a bit of a rainbow because you go up, right? And then come down, but you're not looking back to the beach at all. So if you see my head in here, I'm looking down the line the whole time. So no change of direction. We're trying to get as much projection. So in order to get the projection, don't change the direction. The head is looking down the line. You can see my head is looking down the line. It's not looking back to the beach. So hopefully that's all clear. Let's get back to the Facebook group. All right. So that's a big one for the aerials. Next up, let's look at this bottom turn position. So there are two things that I see going on in the bottom turn that I want to change. There's a lot that I like. We've got some good knee bend. We've got some good hip bend where we've got This backhand is got a lot of power in it. We've got a lot of front arm pressure. Same in this turn, right? We've got same in this turn. So there's a lot going on that we like to see, right? We've got this power going through the legs. We've got a fairly strong body position. But what I want to change is going from what I would call a skiing position, where your feet are almost parallel to each other and your knees and hips are pointed towards the nose of the board, which is really clear in this photo. And let's look at the other ones if it's also as clear. Also clear in this photo, you can see the knees are pointing towards the nose of the board. You can see this back knee is pointing straight towards the nose of the board. But what we want is for the body to be thinking toe forward as in pushing on the nose. We're thinking forward as in going over the toes. And so we get those hips and those knees pointed towards the toes, right? So instead of having the body oriented towards the nose of the board, you're going towards the toes. So think toes, not nose. Think toes, not nose. And that's going to make a really big difference, because what does it do? One, it puts more weight on your front foot. So this is an experiment that you can do at home. You stand up and pretend that your nose of your board is to your left or right, depending on if you're used to riding Portec or Starbertec, and turn your hips towards the nose and see where your weight goes. Turn your hips and body back towards your toes, see where your weight goes. Now, what should happen is, I'd love for you guys to do it right now. Just stand up wherever you are and just do this little experiment. And what you'll see is, well, let you guys tell me what you see. So do this experiment. What do you see? Where do you feel your weight is going when you stand up and you put your hips towards where the nose would be versus towards where your feet would be? So what do you feel? What do you feel in that? And let's see if we can find something in my turns. And then I'll pull up. There's this album that from Jimmy Hep that Gary's photos are from. And I want to pull this up because there's one photo in here that I found really interesting to compare. All right, let's see if I have any bottom turns here. And I want you guys to do this experiment. So stand up, turn your hips towards where the nose would be, and turn the hips towards where your toes would be, and feel how the weight distribution changes on your feet. Now, look, in this example of my bottom turn, you can see that my knees are pointing towards my toes, my hips are pointing towards my toes. I've got that knee bend, that hip bend, leaning over, leaning forward, and that's what allows that hard carve U-shaped bottom turn. Let's see if this one is also. I don't always do a good job with it, but that is the goal, at least. I'm still waiting for you guys in the chat to tell me what you feel with the weight distribution of your feet. And then I'm going to go back to the Facebook. All right, so here's the picture from Gary. So remember that picture. Now, here is a picture from Levi Cyber. Now, look at how we can look at the difference in these two pictures. This is a fun game, spot the difference. You can see how much knee and hip bend Levi has. It's almost like a right angle on the knee and a right angle on the hips, right? We've got a right angle here on the hips and a right angle here on the knee. And this is sort of textbook athletic stance position that we're talking about. So he's not going super, super bent, but what he is doing with those right angles, which is quite a bit of bend, he's also leaning really far over it. Now look with his backhand. He's not sheeting in really aggressively. In fact, the backhand is kind of sheeting out and the front hand is pushing out. And this is really important. You don't want to hold the sail too close to you. And you want to push it away from you, and you want to get that body forward. And you can see, even though his torso is more pointed towards the nose of the board, the knees and hips are driving towards the toes. They're not driving towards the nose of the board, right? So his upper body is pointed towards the nose of the board in this specific example, but the lower body, which is what is most important, and I think in the beginning, what you really want to think about is getting your whole body sort of centered and in line. So what we're really looking at here is just the lower body part. It's pointing towards the rail. Let's see if there are more examples in this album. Here's a little taka from me, not an example of what we're talking about. That's me and a taka. Here's a little push loop. Jimmy Hep is a fun one to follow on Facebook to get a taste of what's going on Maui. Little push loop landing. Here you can see how much I'm really pushing and pulling on the sail to get this landing. The end part of the push loop is very, very active. Let me see if there are more bottom turns. Some of my goiters from the other day. So here's another example of a bottom turn. This is Adonis. You can see he's getting the knees pointing towards the toes, but he could have a lot more bend in the knees and the hips. But he's getting the knees pointed in the right direction. Here's an example of the aerial. You can see, again, that I'm not looking back towards the beach. I'm looking down the line and steering down the line. All right, let's get back to the Facebook group and the chat. So Christoph is saying that more weight on the back foot when the knees point towards the nose. Exactly. And this is the thing. So when people talk about how do you get weight on the front foot, or they say in all the magazines, this is the number one tip for the bottom turns is put more weight on your front foot. Well, how the hell do you do that? I've always been confused with that. And what illuminated it for me when I was a teenager and I was hanging out with Nick Baker, we were in Pozo and I was in his rental car and he was telling me about life and we were talking. And what he said is that his mental note, his mental trick heuristic for remembering how to get front foot pressure was angling the hips. And so it was something that it was a key image for himself. And so the idea of a key image is something that comes up again and again in my coaching. So instead of thinking about sort of 1, 2, 3, we do this, this, this. Often it's helpful to think of just one image at a time. And ideally, it's something that's kind of physical, like, and you can have the picture of it or the movement of it. And that's the key image that helps you with the trick. Anyway, so for Nick, with his wave riding, his key image was getting those hips turned into the turn. So pointing towards the toes instead of the nose. So hips to the toes, not to the nose. And that's how you get the front foot pressure. That's how you get more front foot pressure. It's really, really quite simple. And so that I think is the number one thing to focus on, Gary, is getting the legs in your lower body so it's more pointing towards the toes in the bottom turn. And then for the aerials, pointing down the line. If you work on those two things, those two key images, I think you'll find a big, big step up. Ragnar says it's like riding a snowboard. He puts his weight on the toes, he falls forward into the curve, and he pretends to sheet out with his back legs. Yep, makes sense. Cool. All right, Gary says he will try that today. All right, let's go to the next post. So this is from Jan Thomas. Hello, Jan Thomas. So he recommends this YouTube channel. So this is from, let's turn off this down. This is from Ken Chan, and this is pretty cool. I love raw footage like this. So this is from the Om Miyazaki World Cup earlier this year, and it's awesome to see just raw footage. It's so much more instructive than watching highlight clips where you're seeing moves bang, 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 bang. It really helps you understand what's going on, how riders are lining up, everything else that's going on the water, because the highlight clips of just the off the lips, it's not that instructive. And personally, I find it kind of boring. I really like watching more of the journey. So cool channel and love to see it. Thank you for posting, Jan Thomas. All right, next up, we've got another post from Gary. So this post was from before the other one, and he was saying that he's feeling very stuck and not very comfortable at Hokipa. So I talked with Gary on the beach after this, and we talked about how to adjust his board to make it hopefully better, and it seemed like it did make it better. Gear is so important, and it looks like in the other photos that with the changes in the board setup, your form is a lot better. So like this form isn't great. The form on the other ones is a lot better. And a lot of times what happens is if your board isn't set up right, your body is doing weird things to try to make it work. And that leads to learning bad habits and technique, and ultimately a turn that isn't the turn that you want it to be. So getting your gear set up is really, really important. When I do the master classes, that's the first thing that I do is I look at the gear that you're on, make sure that it's sort of within the range of what I think it should be. That doesn't mean that I'm always right. At the end of the day, the key thing with gear is making sure that you experiment, making sure that you're changing things up, changing your foot straps, playing with it. You don't want to get stuck in a certain setting. If you find a setting you really, really love, great. But even then, it's good to mix things up, try different fins, play with positions a little bit. And Hokipa in particular is a place that is really unforgiving with gear that's not set up correctly. I can feel like I don't know how to windsurf at all, and then I change my mass track by half a centimeter, and suddenly everything works. All right, next up, we've got a post from Stefan. So Stefan is also a Windsurfing Masterclass alumni. He joined us in Denmark a couple of years ago, and I was really impressed. He sent me a few videos. I'm not sure if they are what are included in this post, but he sent me some about his progress, and I was really impressed. We saw huge progress. If you want to sign up for a Windsurfing Masterclass, they are happening this year, and so you can just go to this post. It's in the top of the Facebook group, or it should be in the description of this video, and there are links to the different applications and surveys. So there's the Learn to Loop weekend happening on Maui in April, the Masterclass in-person week in May on Maui, Tenerife in August, and Denmark in September. There's a possibility of other courses as well. For example, Morocco in June, Guincho in Portugal, Viana possibly, or even Madagascar. These are all places I'd like to go and do coaching, but fill out the form, fill out the survey, and maybe those will happen. All right. So Stefan says he found it difficult to set up the start of the wave ride and getting speed on the wave. In onshore conditions, a little backside turn can help him have a more distinct starting point for a bottom turn, usually one-hit wonders. Nothing wrong with a one-hit wonder. But in side-off and longer waves, I found it hard to decide when it was time to go and how to plan the bottom turn as you look down from the shoulder. Often he ended up going straight down the wave, coming to a halt at the bottom. Consequently, he had a hard time generating speed from the wave, and even if he did so, he would regularly kill the speed before getting to the top turn. In some of the pictures, you can see how he's back-footed, and he was really thinking about turning the hips to the wave. So that was what we were talking about with Gary. All right, I'm going to jump into this. All right, Max is going to run. Max, we will catch you later. All right, so let's load up. So these are our photos. Let's make this full screen. So this is in Cape Town, right? All right. Nice timing here. So we can't Because it's a photo sequence, it's hard to see how much speed that you have, but the timing here and the high five moment looks good. Um, awesome radical timing going off the lip. All right, here's the next wave. A little bit too late here. You can see the wave is already broken, but still managing a nice whitewater turn, which we love to see. Beautiful conditions. This looks like flat boom, Cape Point. So staying high on the wave, we like to see that. We like to see high on the wave. So something when the wind is offshore like this that can be really helpful is when you're dropping into the wave, keep this angle with the nose of the board. So instead of pointing back towards the beach when you drop in and then having to do a longer turn and having to come farther in front of the wave, stay high on the wave, and that will help keep speed and make it so you have less turn you need to do, which makes the timing easier. So pointing the nose down the line, like we see on this in this example. Let's see if this is a better off the lip. So something that could be helpful, Stefan, is really focusing on getting low before you go. So in a lot of these, you're starting off somewhat straight in both the knees and the hip. And if you get both of those really low, this is a nice timing, nice turn. You're getting that high five moment. Love to see it. Um, yeah, beautiful, beautiful turn there. That must have felt really good. So it's here again, looking at the start, how straight you are. And it's really hard to go from straight to bent in the turn because that takes away power from the turn, which means it takes away speed. So you have to get low before you go. And it's not possible to get low um, in the turn because then you're absorbing the power. So getting low before you go is really key. So getting that bend in the knees and the hips before you go will be really helpful. I think that's the single biggest thing that I see. Otherwise, for the speed, I think it's really helpful to stay high on the wave. And let's see if I've got an example in this video. Stay high on the wave. And then when you drop in, instead of pointing back to the beach, drop in down the line. And that will allow you to keep a lot of your speed. So like, that's just a little example, but you can see it there. I'm not dropping in back to the beach. I'm angled down the line. Let's see if there's more examples. Also, you can use a lot of space on the wave to get your speed. Let's find one that's a little bit bigger wave, because these waves are a little bit small. The waves that Stefan were on were a little bit bigger than this. All right, let's see here. So staying really high on the wave, which allows me to keep speed, and then going down the line to get speed, and going down the line as I initiate the bottom turn. This is really big. I see a lot of people in side offshore conditions cutting back up wind before they go into the bottom turn. That can be a good technique, but most of the times you don't want to do that. Most of the time you want to go down the line. It helps you save sort of, because you have less turn to do, right? So it makes the timing easier. The more turn you have to do, the more critical the timing is, because then the longer you're going to be in that bottom turn. And you want to start the bottom turn down the line, keep your speed, and that will help make the timing easier. So Stefan, like, that will help with both the timing and the speed on the wave, which are two issues that you're having trouble with. So for when to go, how to plan where to go, it's often best to look at the bottom of the wave, because on the bottom of the wave, you can see what the top of the wave is doing. I know that sounds counterintuitive, but the bottom of the wave reveals to you what's happening. So when the wave is out the back, it's all choppy. And as it's coming in towards the beach and getting ready to break, it gets cleaner and cleaner and cleaner. And so what you want to look for is a clean, smooth spot to do your bottom turn. And that serves two purposes. The first is you're not bottom turning through chop. The second is that as the wave is getting ready to break, it's pulling that water, increasing the surface tension, getting smoother. And so when you see smooth water, that's often a sign that the wave is ready for you, because what you want to be thinking about is going from a power source to a power source. Because if you're coming up into your cutback and there's no power, you can't do anything. How do you know that the wave is ready with its power? By looking at the bottom and seeing once it glasses up, smooths out, that's when you've got power there. And so if you're looking at the bottom of the wave and you see some sections are cleaning up and some sections are really choppy, where it's cleaning up is where it's going to break first, right above that section. Let's look at the beginning of this turn again. So you can see they're quite straight here. Getting more bend in the beginning, so before you initiate the turn, will be really, really helpful. Let's watch this one. And I don't want to give you too many things to worry about, but again, we can see that you're starting pointing really upwind. And in onshore conditions, this can be really helpful. And like you said in your comment, you can do a little backside. It's a good setup turn, gets you in the rhythm, gets you on the rail. But if it's more down the line, that can actually be counterproductive. And you want to drop in pointing down the line already. And here we can see you've had to do this little turn to get into position. And that just makes it harder to get the timing lined up. And here we're going from a straighter position to a more bent position, right? Pretty straight as we're going into the turn. And that's actually absorbing the pressure. And so what we want to, before we go into the bottom turn, and then you can push against your bent joints, your bent knees and your bent hips. You can push against that. But if you're compressing as you're in the turn, then you're actually taking pressure off the rail, which is the opposite of what we want. We want to be putting pressure on the rail for our bottom turns. All right, Stefan, I've said a lot of things. Hopefully something clicked. We talked about getting low before you go, getting the nose pointed down the line before your bottom turn. And so you're starting your bottom turn pointing down the line. And 3 is looking for a smooth patch of water in front of the wave to do your bottom turn, and so that you know your timing. So it helps with placement timing. All right, this is from my session a few days ago, and we were talking about more U-shaped bottom turns in that live stream. And so this is an example of one, because I didn't have a good example at that time. And this felt good. If I was self-coaching myself, I would like to see more bend in my knees. I've got a little bit more than a 90-degree bend in my knees, but I'm pointed towards my toes with everything, which is what I like to see. You can see with my head that I'm looking where I'm going to go on the wave, up the wave, right? I'm not looking down the line, and that's another big thing for getting the U-shaped bottom turn is just looking. So instead of looking down the line, you're looking up the wave where you're going to go, and you make that plan of where you're going to go as you're dropping in. So I've made this plan at about this point. I'm looking, or even earlier, even before the video starts, I'm looking where I'm going to go. My head is glued to that one spot on the top of the wave. I'm not looking down the line. I'm looking at that one spot, and I've chosen a spot fairly close to me, come up to it, and do my cutback. If I'm coaching myself, something that I see here is that my legs are pretty straight, and I've got a pretty clean bottom turn, and so it doesn't affect too much. But what it does do is I'm coming up into the cutback with these pretty straight legs, hitting the lip, and because my legs are straight instead of bent, where can they go? They can only go bent, right? They can't straighten more. So then the lip hits me and the legs bend, and that's what creates this really tight, pivoty turn, which is cool. It's nice to do something like that. It's a little bit different, but it also maybe would have been better if my knees had been more bent. So coming out of the bottom turn and coming back into compressed knees, then I would have had something to push against, and I could have pushed against my feet against the lip, and which would have had more tail projection, and so it would have been less of a pivot turn and maybe more of a tail blowout turn, or the fins would have come out more. Different kind of turn. Anyway, all right, next up. All right, we've got a question from Ragnar before we get into Chris Powell. Ragnar says, tips on how to read waves and predict what the wave will do next. Yeah, this is really important. This is something we talk a lot about in the in-person masterclasses, and it's something we can talk about more in the live streams as well. It's so important. Predicting the waves is so important. And the first thing when it comes to reading waves is intention. If you have the intention, your brain will start to pick up the cues. So what do I mean by intention? I mean looking at the waves and the water consciously, trying to figure out what signs lead to what outcome. So looking at the color of the water, looking at the texture of the water, looking at how it's changing, how it's moving, and then seeing what ends up happening. And so if you have the intention to pay attention, then your brain starts to pick up those cues, see the signs that lead to the different outcomes, and starts to all fit together. And then you naturally get better at ocean awareness. Now, that said, there are heuristics, of course, like we talked about with the smooth water for deciding where to bottom turn. This is complicated, though. We spend our whole lives trying to get better at wave selection. So it's not like there's something you can do 1, 2, 3, and then you can read waves. It's about learning these little tips and tricks, and again, that intention, having the intentional awareness, is very, 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 very important. And then every spot has its own idiosyncrasies, and so if you're in Tenerife, you're going to be looking for different cues than if you're in Maui, and there are a set of common rules, of course, and things that you're looking for, and different awarenesses. But it's also important to be able to read the dynamic ocean. And so if you're thrown in a new spot, you're aware of what works for that specific spots. And so you're realizing, okay, the direction of the swell. One thing before we get into this loop from Chris, because this is one important thing, Ragnar, about lining up on waves. And this, I feel like I've got to pause everything to talk about this, because it is a really important point that I don't see people doing enough. I want you to pay attention to the landmarks on the beach. So when you're riding waves, when you're going out, I want you to always have an awareness of where you are relative to the beach. And that way, if you ride a good wave, start a wave in a good spot, you know, okay, that's lined up with the bathrooms on the beach, or that's lined up with the big tree. And you need to pick two spots. So when you're first getting used to lining up with landmarks on the beach, you need to pick two spots, because if you just pick one, then you don't really have a perspective of where you are relative to it. So you need to pick two spots. But what you need to do is start getting an awareness, a spatial awareness of where you are on the water. And so you know that you're riding the wave more upwind or more downwind. And so you know within the meter almost of exactly where you are on a sort of a horizontal plane with the beach. And that is really important, because once you have that spatial understanding, then it can help you, one, catch the waves in the right spot and ride the waves in the right spot, because often, because waves are influenced by the bottom shape, the waves are breaking in the same place in the same way. And so if you find a wave breaking in a good way, you can keep going back to that place. So having that awareness relative to the beach is very, very important, and I don't see people doing it enough. All right, let's get into these forwards from Chris. So Chris says he's not been trying forwards for 6 months, but he had a good day at the beach to give them a go. He could more or less pick up where he left off, and he's getting around okay, but he seems to lose a bit of rotation at the end and get around with his feet in the straps and under the sail. He managed to water start away from about 80% of them, but they're still wet, and he doesn't feel like he's landed a proper forward yet. You can see that his takeoff could be more extended before tucking up, and that he needs to throw the sail more into the wind and maybe look backwards more. But is there anything else he can do to keep the rotation at the end? He feels like he's sheeting in, but maybe not tucking in enough. All right, let's make this big, and let's look. It's a solid rotation. All right, let's watch the other one. Oops, we gotta scroll back to it. Let's watch the other one, and then let's see. Or is it just one video? Is it the same video, just in slow motion? Might be the same video, but in slow motion. All right, let's watch this in regular speed, and then let's find some tips for Chris. So first off, on the takeoff, it's looking good. You could get more extension, so throwing the sail up more, and then you have a more dynamic sort of starting the rotation moment, which will help give you more whip in the forward, which will help you land on the board. And you can think about throwing it sort of up and a little bit into the wind, and then you're pulling in with that backhand and pushing with the front hand. We could see a little bit more head motion. Also, it looks like you're sheeting in good at the beginning, but then you stop sheeting in sort of halfway through the loop. And so something that could be really useful is thinking about not just sheeting in, because I feel like sheeting in is too passive of a description of what's actually happening in the forward, which is more like you're torquing the gear around in a 360. And so you're pushing with that front arm and pulling with the backhand and twisting your torso and looking back with your head to get the gear around in a 360, which is what the forward loop is. So it's not just like you sheet in and then you go, right? Like you would if you were pumping, trying to get in the straps or something like that. It's more like you're torquing the gear around, and there's a pivot point that's in the middle of your boom. And with the front hand, you're pushing forward around that pivot point, and your backhand, and you're pulling back. And so you're pushing and pulling and twist around that pivot point. Does that make sense? So imagine you have that point of rotation that's in the middle of your boom, and you're twisting around that rotation, and your body is lined up with that rotation point. Because one thing I see people doing, and Chris, you're not quite doing this, which is good, is they just pull in with both hands, and they're thinking, oh, I need to sheet in. And that can kind of work, but it's really actually opposite to what the forward loop is, which is this twist. And you want to think of that rotation point of being, again, the middle of your boom. So you're pulling in with the backhand, and you're pushing forward with the front hand and twisting your torso and looking behind you to try to get everything twisting around that rotation point. Is this making sense? Let me know if this is making sense in the chat, because super, super important point, and super misunderstood point. This is one of the biggest mistakes I see people doing. So that will help. Another thing we see is Alex is saying that you can scissor the board more with your feet. So that means pushing forward the front foot and pulling back with the back foot. And that will definitely help, because it looks like your board is getting sort of left behind you in the rotation. I think that rotation, like thinking of rotating, having that pivot point in the middle of the boom is really helpful. Um, and that also helps you get away from thinking of it like a somersault. Because if you think of it like a somersault, which you are a little bit, because I can see that you're throwing your front shoulder down. If you're throwing it like a somersault, it's actually counteracting the forces that create the rotation. And so you actually can lean back and lean away from it and push everything up. And it's the sail that's making the rotation, not your body. And it's by pulling on the sail and pushing up on the sail that then the sail rotates you around. And if you're leaning into it, then you're taking pressure off of the sail. And so you have less power on the sail. And so with that front hand, you can push up rather than down. And really think about that again, that your pivot point is like you've got a pole going through the middle of your boom and you're rotating horizontally around that, right? And so I feel like that metaphor should be like an aha moment for a lot of you guys about the forward, whereas you're like, okay, how do I sheet in and push at the same time? Well, that's how, is you're rotating around this pole that's going through the middle of your boom. So it's the same rotational direction if you're pushing with that front hand, pulling with the backhand, looking behind you, and twisting the torso really hard to try to get that rotation around that pivot point, around that pole that's going through the boom between your hands. Right? Is that making sense? Now, Chris, there's another way that you could land on your board, which is a little bit of a cheat, possibly. And that's just to go higher because you are getting the rotation. You're stopping a little bit because here you can see we're sheeting out. But if you did this, let's say 2 meters higher, you would also land a lot cleaner. So even if you didn't change your technique and you just went higher, you would also land it cleaner. So with the forward loop, height can accommodate for what you're lacking in technique. Now it's a bit of a trade-off. I would say if you were less far along in your forward journey, uh, I would definitely not recommend going higher, but you're pretty far around. You're getting pretty decent forwards. So you could go for higher ones as well. But I would really, really think about that pivot point. Um, Thomas is saying that this is hard to understand. You should stretch the front arm forward to force the last into the wind before pulling back of the rig in. Also look at backhand and pretend the knee is roped to the backhand. So this, I've heard this from you, Thomas. I've heard this from other people, and I think it can be useful and helpful. For me, I think you want to look even past the backhand in order to get these really nice forwards where you have a nice lifty rotation. You've got to be looking really hard back around. It's like you're trying to torque everything in that spin. But really good work, Chris. I feel like your forwards, you've passed you've got over the hump. The most, and you've got a pretty good start to rotation. You're over the fear hurdles, so looks good. All right, we already talked about this. These are the live in-person Windsurfing Masterclass that are happening this year. So we've got looping. Speaking of looping, some forward loop weekends in April. We have masterclass on Maui in May, Tenerife, Denmark, possibly Morocco or Ginchu. There are other courses here. If enough people are interested, they will happen. So check out this post. Also, if you're interested in big waves, there is a big wave elite program that a few people are interested in. It is pretty exclusive program, difficult program, will include a lot of training. The cost is pretty high. It's definitely not for everyone, and it is pretty intense. We'll be dealing with rescues and jet skis, and yeah, learning how to ride big waves. All right, next up, we've got a post um, from. So one more thing before we get into this other post. Thomas says that looking at the hand enforces the pull. So see, try it, see if it helps. All right, Nick, he is working on the back loops. All right, Nick is on a roll. Nick was working on his forward loops last week on his bad tack and getting them pretty solid. And now he's working on back loops. Ooh la la. This is pretty close. Pretty close. Something with the back loop that we lost our place here. Something with the back loop that is like a good lesson for other moves as well is you have to really, really want it. So a lot of times the landing isn't perfect and you have to just wrestle it. Wrestle it. So it looks like this one, could you have wrestled it out? Maybe, maybe not. Um, but that landing is often not going to be super smooth in the beginning. And you're landing something like this, and you've got to kind of wrestle it, see how to hold the gear so that you can then water start out of it, maybe take a foot out of the straps. And that's how they work in the beginning. All right, let's look at this full loop. So coming upwind on the takeoff, that looks good. Hand is going a little bit back, looking straight up. A little bit more rotation than I would like to see off the ramp. But from this angle, it's hard to say exactly what's going on. But generally, we want to go off the ramp just straight up and then start rotating. And then that allows us to spot the landing sooner. Keeping the sail nice and tight, that's good. You don't want to be sheeting out at this part. If you sheet out at this part of the loop, you're going to end up doing more of a push loop rotation, which we don't want to do. There's really a lot more right here than wrong. Still guiding a little bit with the board, kicking the board around. So something that will be helpful, Nick, is to really think about just going straight up and steering the back loop with the sail and your upper body, not with the board. So there's a little bit of steering with the board going on where you're kicking the board up above you and steering with the board. But with the back loop, it's like you go up and then you're steering with your sail, your head, and your upper body, and then the board follows. I'll pull up another back loop in a minute. The only other thing, so the two things, again, you're super close. So the first thing is conceptual, and it's really think about going straight up, and then you're steering with the upper body, and the board is falling. So you don't want to be leading with the board. You want to be leading with your shoulders, your head, and the sail, your arms. And the second thing ties into that, and it's more technique related, is as you're coming down into the landing, you want to really make sure that you're pushing the sail towards the nose of the board, forward towards the nose of the board. And from this angle, it looks like that's not happening. Now, it might be happening and we just can't tell from the angle, but that is a really important part of getting a clean landing. It kills the power in the sail, puts you in a position where then it's a lot easier to land. And so that's this kind of windshield wiper motion where you're moving your arms side to side towards the nose of the board. All right, somewhere in here, there's a very impressive back loop from Brauzinho. Let's see if we can find that. And if we can learn anything from it. Maybe we can't. Maybe it's just too perfect and we can't learn anything from it, but maybe we can. Where is that back loop? It's more in the middle. There we go. Okay, so this is a big back loop by one of the best back loopers of all time. Does that make it better or worse for learning? I'm not sure. I could see it being better because we know the technique is really perfect, or I could see it being worse because far away from practical jumping conditions. But anyway, what I want to point out here is he's just going straight up. There's no rotation at all. And then the rotation starts from the head. And then you can kind of see it here, but the sail and the body are rotating before the board. So you can see the sail is already pointing back towards the water, and the board is more sort of horizontal. It's almost parallel with the water. So it's sort of trailing behind, and then here they catch up. And what you can kind of see here is that he's pushing the sail towards the nose of the board. You can't see it that well. And again, really focusing on that nose first landing. I wonder if I have another one that I can pull up that shows this a little bit more clearly. I'll have to look if I have more videos. I know I do, but it's something that I can post in the group. I'll do that later this week. Yeah, but anyway, hopefully that's clear. All right, let's keep going. So those are two things to work on. All right, next up, we've got a post from Hans, and we were talking about goals on the last live stream. And he was thinking about lee side riding, and he wants to focus on starting riding waves often. Awesome. I love lee side riding. Lee side riding is a great exercise. If you don't know what lee side riding is, it's when you're on the other side of the sail. So the wind is coming on the other side of the sail, like this example from Bernd Roediger we're going to watch in a second. So Hans here has been doing lee side riding more often at the end of a wave ride and finishing with attack. Awesome. And now he wants to do it on the critical part of the wave as well. I love this. This is a great idea, Hans. He can have brutal currents at high tide, and so it'd be a great skill to avoid the many walks of shame. Yeah, I love it. This is great. I love lee side riding. This is an example of getting into lee side riding like attack, which is, I think, the easiest way to do it. You could also do it like a carving 360 when you're going out, but I think this is the best way to do it, and has the added bonus of helping you improve your attack technique as well. This is a masterful example from Bernd, where he's actually getting some turns on the wave here as well, riding on the lee side. Beautiful. I really recommend this. This is also something we go over in the in-person masterclasses. It's one of the first exercises that I have people do, because it teaches you a different awareness of the sail, the wave, and it's tack training at the same time. So lee side riding is something that everyone should have in their toolbox, and something they should work on. It's a lot of fun. All right, we've got Jay Linson. Good evening. He had a jumping session and a wave sailing session with Rich. Awesome. Discovering the fun of cross-on wave days. Love it. Cross-on wave days. A lot of fun. All right, guys, that is it. We are caught up. So if you want to join an in-person windsurfing masterclass this year, if you want to improve your windsurfing, get together with some like-minded windsurfers, I find the community in these events is really cool. There's so many, you guys are so interesting, and it's so great when you come together on these weeks. So if you want to work on your loops, how are your loops? If you want your loops to be better, if you want to jumpstart your loop journey, we're doing an accelerated Learn to Loop weekend on Maui in April. Apply here. You can find this, should be in the description of this video or on the Facebook group. If you want to join the wave sailing masterclass that is happening on Maui in May, you can apply here, or Tenerife or Denmark, or if you're interested in the other locations like Morocco or Kinshu or even Madagascar. If we get enough people interested, we will go to Madagascar. I love Madagascar. Very consistent windsurfing, very fun, very much an adventure. There. Apply here. All right, and that is it I'm going to sign off. You guys have a good windy week. I've left you with a lot of things to think about. If you are applying any of these lessons to your own windsurfing, remember to apply it one at a time. If you try and focus on too many things in the water, it's not going to work. So get low before you go. Don't change the direction to get better projection. We were talking about that for aerials, but it's also true for jumps, right? If you're going up into your back loop and you're changing your direction as you're going up the wave, that is also going to hurt your projection. So if you want to get that high projection going up, straight up, then you can't be changing your direction too much. And so what we always talk about the back loops is you want to be steering up into the wind, means you got to do that earlier. All right, guys, I'm going to sign off. Trees are blowing. I'm going to get ready to go to the beach. I hope you have a good windy week. I will see you next week, Sunday. All right. Take care. Bye-bye.